Imagine if each morning when you wake up, you're smiling and looking forward to your day, knowing you are happy even while you're dealing with grief and loss. The Grief and Happiness podcast inspires, comforts, and supports you with each new episode. I'm Emily Threat, welcoming you to explore with me your life of endless possibilities. Aloha. I'm so happy to have you here with us today. We have a delightful guest, Terry Tucker, and I think you're really going to enjoy all the things that he has to say. So welcome, Terry.
Emily, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Oh, that's great. You have such a fascinating background. The negotiation for
SWAT team negotiation.
SWAT team negotiation. Thank you. It would just slipped my mind when I started to say it. It just sounds that wow. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, usually your next door neighbor is not a SWAT team hostage negotiator in that.
Yeah. I haven't had one on my podcast before, so this is different. but that's not all you do. So, and you and I we were talking a little bit beforehand about how really the kind of main purpose is for us to help people, and that's why you're here with us today. Is you've got some, I think, really expert advice on helping people move forward.
Yeah, I remember, I'm old enough that I kind of grew up with Mr. Rogers, Fred
Me
Rogers,
too.
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I heard a story that when Fred Rogers died, that his family was going through his effects and they found his wallet. And in his wallet was a scrap piece of paper in which he had written 4 words, which those 4 words were life is for service. And, you think about how many lives he touched, how many young people he helped say, it doesn't matter what you look like or what issues you're going through, you're still important, you're still valuable in life. And I just love that story because I think we should all aspire, to have our lives have meaning in how we serve other people.
Oh, that's a great story. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I know after my second husband died, of the 2 that died, I thought, okay, now what do I do? Because we had just moved to Maui, and I just was trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. And it turned out that what I was supposed to do was help people. And I've got a variety of ways now that I help people find happiness while they're grieving, which is, people think is kind of an oxymoron, but I believe it's necessary. And so that's my purpose. And I like to do that. It feels really good to help other people.
It does. And I think, people ask me a lot about purpose, and I try not to do it in the singular. I feel, at least in my life, that I've had purposes throughout my life. That when I was young, you can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. So when I was young, I felt my purpose was sports, athletics. I kind of ate, drank, and slept basketball. And then as I sort of moved into adulthood, my grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps, but he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad always remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us. Your husband's been shot. And that was 1933. So when I expressed an interest in following my grandfather's footsteps, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to go to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids and live happily ever after. But that's the life my father wanted me to live. That was not the life I felt I was supposed to live. So I ended up waiting. My father was dying of cancer when I graduated from college. So I had a choice. I could have said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail, or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So I spent several years in business before my father died, and then eventually followed my dream. So I felt, at one point in time, my purpose was to be in law enforcement. And now, in all honesty, I'm probably coming to the end of my life. I've been battling a rare form of cancer for 11 years. I kind of feel my purpose is to put as much goodness, as much positivity, as much motivation, as much love back into the world as I can. So I think, purposes can change throughout your life. And I think we need to be open to those changes when they present themselves.
Absolutely. And the people that get stuck are the ones that have the most problems. And I think one of the things with listening to podcasts can help with is people go, oh, I could do that. Or maybe I could try that too. And to open things that they might not have thought of before.
Yeah, exactly. We tend to pigeonhole ourselves that, this is the only thing I can do, or this is the only thing I'm supposed to do. And I'm just not sure that's the case. I mean, it certainly hasn't been in my life. And I think a lot of it has to do with following your heart, following what you feel is important in your life. I mean, we all have unique gifts and talents. We're not all the same. And I, for one, am very glad that we're not all the same. I mean, think how boring life would be if were all exactly the same. But so many people I found in life just kind of live a casual life. And because of that, their goals, their dreams, their ambitions become a casualty of sort of that unplanned living. And there's an entrepreneur by the name of Ed Milet, and he talks about the 4 types of people in the world. He said the first group are the unmotivated. And he said that's the vast majority of people in life that you will encounter. He said the second group are the motivated. Pretty simple, kind of a low-level thing. If I do this, then I will get that. A lot of people live very happy and successful lives just being motivated. He said the third group are the inspirational people. Inspiration coming from 2 words meaning in spirit, where if you're inspirational, you move people with your energy. And then the fourth group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people want to be like you. And so, I always strive for the aspirational part. I'm not anywhere close to being there yet, but can you imagine the impact you would have on other people's lives if you were an aspirational type of person?
Oh, that's true. You just made me think about the people I know that I would consider aspirational. And I'm so grateful that they're in my lives, because watching them is so inspirational to me, to want me to do more, do better, do significant, whatever it is that comes up. I love those 4 categories. I think that's really quick. I don't know where that word came from. I think that's really good. I know. I can remember many years ago, there was a song that came out, and I was trying to think of the name of the singer, and I can't, but it was called "Is That All There Is?" And it was kind of a haunting melody. And she said that over and over again in the song. And it made me start thinking then, looking at my life and saying, where I am right now, is this where I'm going to be forever? Is this all I can do? And what really is out there for me? And the song actually has kind of floated in my life several times when I feel like I'm starting to fall out of sync or might be getting stuck on something, and makes me think, okay, I need to re-examine what's going on here and see what's best for me and those I love around me at this point.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that sort of self-reflection is important for all of us, to do. And I remember reading a book by the name of Do Hard Things by Steve Magnus. And he talks about in his book how, I don't remember if it was a psychologist or a professor or what it was, but he did an experiment, and it was mostly with younger people. And he basically put them in a room, and the only thing in the room was a table and a chair. No windows or anything like that. And they were not allowed to have anything with them. No devices, no cell phones, iPads, anything like that. The only other thing in the room was a buzzer. And if you pressed the buzzer, you got an electric shock. And the results of his research were that 67% of the men shocked themselves and 28% of the women shocked themselves, because they were so ingrained with, okay, I got to send this text, and who responded to me. we don't take time to be self-reflective. We don't take time. And I think the important thing that came out of that study was that we should all, regardless whether we're young, middle-aged, old, whatever it is, spend 5 or 10 minutes every day just sitting down. And I'm not talking about meditating or praying or anything, but just be alone with yourself. Because I think so many people aren't. They're uncomfortable. Your podcast is about grief and happiness. When people are grieving, they want to distract themselves. They want to do other things. I got to get on the iPhone. I got to get on the iPad. I got to do, and they don't spend the time. They don't do the work. There's that old saying that says, time heals all wounds. Well, it's not really the time. It's the work you put in during that time that actually heals the wounds. And part of that work needs to be spending time alone with yourself. And let your mind go wherever it goes. If you're thinking about your childhood, let it go there. If you're thinking about what you're having for dinner, let it go there as well. But be comfortable being who you are. And part of being alone with yourself is, I think, that self-reflection. What am I doing here? Where am I supposed to go? What is my purpose in life? And by spending time, not all involved in the world, but just with yourself, a lot of times I think you come to the answer to that question.
I think so too. I teach journaling. I'm in the middle of teaching a class in that right now. And I just think that's invaluable for that, because when you just sit and think about something, with me anyway, it just kind of bounces around in my head and I don't get real far with it. But when I start writing it down, there's something about realizing more, seeing more. And I think it's really effective. I've got so many journals in my house, and I've got different kinds of journals for different purposes. And most of them are a little composition book that like we used to use in school, because they're inexpensive and they've got lots of pages with lines in them. So I fill them up. And it helps me so much, because things will come out with that don't come out another way. Julia Cameron wrote The Writer's Way. And it's a book really kind of on creativity, or The Artist's Way. There's 2 books. The Artist's Way was the one that she did this in. And she suggests that every morning writing what she calls the morning pages. And with the morning pages, you write 3 pages, 3 full pages from top to bottom without stopping at all. You don't really take your pen off the paper except for to turn the page. And it takes a minute to get in the habit of being able to do that. And usually the first page, with me anyway, is not worth much. But by the time I get to the 3rd page, I'm really having interesting things coming out and realizations that I wouldn't have had had I not taken the time, as you said, to just really explore what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, journaling is such a powerful thing. If you think about, there's a program called Masterclass where people get on and kind of give an online class. And I was watching the one that was done by Doris Kearns Goodwin.
I love her.
She's amazing. And she was talking about, she's written books on Theodore Roosevelt, Lyndon Baines Johnson, Teddy Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. And she said, my sources were the diaries, the journals that these men kept. And, in those journals were their fears, their hopes, their ambitions, their aspirations, and what was going on in the world. And you could really build a book around, what they were feeling. And people don't really do that much anymore. They don't spend time spending a few hours or even 10 minutes, just write, here's what happened today and things like that. And here's how it affected me. And you're right, things come out when we put stuff down on paper. I remember when I wrote my book, and I don't know if you had the same experience. People were like, well, how did you write your book? I said, well, I had 2 rules. I said, number 1, I made a promise to myself that I would write at least 1 page every day, Monday through Saturday. And the second rule was I would not edit anything until I had the first draft done. And there were days that I sat down and wrote absolute garbage. And then the next day you would sit down, oh, you would write something a little better. And then maybe garbage the next day. And then maybe a little, but you sort of put it all together at the end and you're like, okay, that's going out. That's going out. Oh no, this is good. I'll keep that. And it was just a real simple way of eventually, writing 1 page a day. I mean, you think about it, over a year, you have almost 300 pages of things that maybe want to go in a book. Maybe that's not going in a book, but you have something that you've created. And I think it gives you an opportunity to, that creativity, you bring things out that, like, where did that come from? I wasn't thinking that, or I didn't know what was going on with that, but all of a sudden it's there on paper and it's like, oh, maybe I should give that some more thought or some more time.
Yeah, I find that things just pop out on the page that I wouldn't have been able to speak, or they wouldn't have just automatically have come to me without that process of writing. I love Doris Kearns Goodwin. I heard her speak once, and
oh, did you? Okay,
yeah, oh, she's fabulous. And she told about the writing of her book, The Fitzgeralds and the Kennedys, which is a really thick book, and it's fabulous. I learned so much from that book, not just about the Fitzgeralds and the Kennedys, but she said that she was able to write it because the families liked her writing so much, how in depth she went and with the details and stuff, that they offered her. She was the only person they offered all the diaries.
Wow.
And she used those diaries to write that book. And the book is fabulous. I highly recommend it, because you just see a whole different side of the whole family as real people. Because I think people look at people like icons when they've been a president or something like that.
Sure.
But you can see them as people by reading it from the perspective of what they were writing in their diaries. And she's not quoting the diaries, but she's able to draw their story out from the diaries, from writing those.
Yeah. And she talked about that in the masterclass, about how she wants to rely on you writing a diary. That's first person. That's what John Kennedy wrote, as opposed to another book that said something about Kennedy in it. She wanted that first person account because she felt that the books were richer, they were deeper, they were really, as you say, showing people as a person, not as the president of the United States.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so much more interesting. You can kind of see people from a distance, but not really know who they are.
Yeah,
what's in them, what drives them, why they make the decisions that they make. So I love writing journals. I started writing a diary in 7th grade.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, and kind of went for that. I actually found it once we moved to Maui. I thought we'd gotten rid of most of what we owned, but I found my first diary from 7th grade, and I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting to look at how my brain worked then.
Well, think of the legacy that you're leaving to your family. Mm-hmm. when you die, here's what I was thinking when I was in 7th grade, and as an adult, and you're right. And I think those will probably be fascinating to your family, if not for other people as well, to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really think so. Oh, it's fascinating. I strongly encourage that. I think it's a good way to find your purpose in life, is by writing. I know that happened that way with me for what I'm doing now, because I am a writer. I teach writing at the university level. I've retired from that, but I teach it online, and they keep inviting me back to teach online.
Good for you.
They like my class, and I love teaching it. I just love the connection with the students, and really feel like I'm making a difference with them.
Absolutely.
So I've written for many, many years. So after Ron died and I found myself here, I made new friends in the process of coming here, but I still felt kind of basically alone, living in the house by myself and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I think if I would have sat there and just let things float around in my head, I could have gone what my mom used to call stir crazy, But the process of writing things down, I kept discovering things as I was writing. And the more I wrote in the different ways that I was choosing to write, the more I learned about me and what I wanted, what I needed. And I thought, the way I'm writing, I think would really help other people who are dealing with grief. And so I didn't know anybody here who had anybody die except for my husband. So I put a notice on Meetup and said, if you want to get together and write about grief, come on over to my house. And they did. It was
Really?
amazing. Wow. We had a really good group. We started out once a month, and after a couple of months, they said, can't we come every other week? Once a month isn't often enough. We want to do this more. Because everybody was finding that process of writing like that was therapeutic, just made them feel better. It helped them get some of the chaos out, because it's not uncommon when you've lost someone to feel kind of not right in the world, And by writing about it, you can really explore those things, and they got great benefit out of it. So that's what led to all the work that I'm doing now, is writing. So I'm a big advocate of writing.
That's great.
Yeah, everybody doesn't have to write a book. Just write for yourself.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Learn about yourself. I mean, and if you can do it that way, writing it down and go back and read it, who knows what you're gonna, I don't remember writing that. I don't remember saying, thinking that. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised sometimes when I go back over the things that I've written and go, really, I said that? Because that was good,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's, like I said, when I was writing my book, it was, you'd write a page that was, there's no way this is going to make it in. But then the next day you wrote something better, and, okay, and it just improves. Like I said, I mean, I said I'd write one page a day. A lot of times it was, you write 10 pages in a day or something like that. But that was my minimum. I will write at least one page a day. And it's amazing. Having never been a writer, enjoyed writing, enjoyed reading, but never written a book. Totally different experience.
So what motivated you to write your book?
Really, it was two conversations that I had. I've had many jobs in my life. One was I was a girls' high school basketball coach, and I had a player that I had coached who had moved to Colorado, where my wife and I live, with her fiance, and the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. She got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and then living that reason. And then the other conversation was with a young man who was in college who reached out to me on social media. And he said, what do you think are the most important things that I should know to not just be successful in my job or in business, but to be successful in life? And Emily, I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others. I didn't want to give him not that those aren't important. Those are incredibly important. But I wanted to see if maybe I could go deeper with them. So I spent some time and I wrote some notes and eventually kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So part of my cancer journey was in 2020, I had my leg amputated because of the cancer. And during the 3 to 4 month period where I was healing after that amputation, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how the book is called Sustainable Excellence, the 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And that's how the book came to be.
Wow. That's fascinating. Going to have to read that. Usually I try to get a hold of all the books beforehand before I interview somebody, but it didn't happen this time, but I'm going to read it now.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was great experience. You're obviously, you teach this, so you understand it. I'm like, okay, I've got this. What do I do with it? And I was like, is it worth trying to get it published? Is it worth, trying to get it into the hands of other people? And, I have a very strong faith life. And, people always ask me, I'm like, yeah, I think it was I wrote it, but I think it was inspired by something much bigger than me. And so I gave it to a couple friends, and I'm like, look, please be radically honest with me. Is this any good? Is this something you think I should try to publish? And they came back and said, yes, absolutely, and you should. So I wrote a book, and that was, I've never had a baby in my life, but that was the closest I've ever come to having something that I actually created in life. And I was fortunate to get with a not-for-profit publishing company that had editors. And I remember the editors would suggest, you should change this, or you should expand that, or take that out. And I was almost indignant. How dare you? This is my work. But again, I mean, those are the experts. Why would I be involved with them and try to tell them how to do their job? So I remember I always used to say, well, let me sleep on it, and I'll decide in the morning. And I think 99.5% of the time, the next morning, it was always like, yeah, you're right. Okay, I'll expand this, or I'll take that out, or whatever they suggested. And I think it's a much better book because I relied on their expertise.
That's often true. I've actually written 5 books now, 1 chapter in another book. So that's a total of 6 books, and with different editing things each time as I went along. And this last book that I'm writing right now, I have finally found an editor who is spectacular at what they do. And there are 3 of us that are going over it, not just once, but several times through the whole thing, and having interesting conversations about things. They don't just change it arbitrarily. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I have learned more about writing in the process of editing this book than I did in any of my graduate classes that I took in writing.
It's amazing.
It's
isn't
great. It really is. when you get somebody good, and they're not easy to come by, but it's really good this time. And I think writing your story, like you wrote your story, I wrote my story in a way that it's got me in there, but I'm not the point of the book. And it sounds like your book has you there, but you aren't the point of the book. And right. I think that's really valuable. When I first started trying to find books after Ron died, after my other husband died, it was a while back, and there weren't that many books published out there. By publishing is so different now with all the self-publishing and stuff. But then you couldn't get that many books that had much to do with grief. And I was kind of disappointed in that. So this time I thought, well, I'm sure it's better now. So I started reading grief books, and I would say 90% of them are memoirs. People are telling their story about what happened to them. And I'm sure it was incredibly valuable to them for getting the whole story out. And dealing with it in writing. And I highly recommend it. I think it's a really good thing to do. However, there's only so many of those books that you can read, and I didn't find them particularly helpful to me. Okay. So I think it's wonderful when you can use what your experience is or has been to help other people find out about their experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, when I got cancer, I think, and I have a very rare form of melanoma that appeared on the bottom of my foot. It had absolutely nothing to do with sun exposure and things like that. But I remember, I had this callus break open on the bottom of my foot, and I was coaching basketball at the time. And so I didn't think much of it. But after it not healing, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray, and he said, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And, he showed it to me, and neither one of us were concerned about it. But, fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology. And then 2 weeks later, I get this call from him. And as I mentioned, he's a friend. And the more difficulty he's having explaining to me what's going on, the more frightened I'm becoming, until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have this rare form of melanoma. And I know I went through all the stages that we associate with grief. at that time. I mean, it was initially, denial. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And, then you kind of get mad. And our daughter was in high school at the time. And, you start bargaining with God, look, just let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. And then I got down, certainly a little depressed. But then I just got to a point where, it's like, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck, for lack of a better word. This is something that I don't like the cards that I've been dealt, but I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability. And when I was diagnosed, melanoma was a death sentence. I've lived 11 years with it now. I don't know how. There have been times where I should have died. After I had my leg amputated, I found out I had tumors in my lungs. And about 8 months later, my oncologist he showed me the CAT scan from back then. And I have no medical background. I don't really know how to read a CAT scan, but I kind of was like, well, that doesn't look like it's supposed to be there, kind of situation. And I had these big tumors in my lungs, and I had fluid all around the pleural spaces. And I remember looking at my oncologist and saying, how was I alive? And he kind of smiled and shook his head, and he was like, I have no idea, because you shouldn't have been. Which, said to me, I guess God's not done with me yet, and whatever time I have left, I always talk about when I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. Don't spend a lot of time worrying about the dying part. Everybody's going to die, but not everybody's really going to live. So spend your life living your life, figuring out, as we were talking earlier, your purpose in life, and live that purpose. And I think if you do, death is not nearly as scary as it is for all the people who never live their purpose, never find their purpose in life. And when it comes their time, they seem to be the ones that want to go kicking and screaming, give me another month, give me another year.
Yeah.
Well, you had plenty of time. Unfortunately, you didn't do anything with it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so beautifully said. I know I feel more now like at peace, I think is the way I say it. It's not that I have cancer or have something like that, but at my age, a whole lot of friends are already gone. All my family, almost all of my family is already gone. And I could worry about it, or I could be helping people right now with what I'm helping them with. And I feel a lot better about doing that than I do about worrying about what would happen and that sort of thing.
That's sort of the good thing about death. We all get it once.
Yeah.
It's an equal opportunity situation for us. And I remember hearing a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that went, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice.
Oh, wow.
That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
Wow.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not looking to hasten my demise in any way, but like I said, death is not nearly as scary for me because I believe I live the purposes for which I was put on this earth to do.
That's right. Wow. That is so fabulous. I appreciate you so much being on my podcast today. You've given people a whole lot to think about. And I really enjoyed talking to you. Very, very glad that you came.
Well, Emily, thanks for having me on. I always say it's nice people like you that allow me to come on and have a conversation with them. And if that conversation makes a positive difference in somebody's life, then today's been a good day.
That's right. Well, all the information about Terry and his book are going to be in our show notes so that you can get your copy, because I'm sure you're going to want to read it. And next time I'll have somebody different that you can listen to, and I'll look forward to having you come back then. Aloha. Do you want more comfort, support, and happiness? Join the Grief and Happiness Alliance. Visit my website at lovingandlivingyourwaythroughgrief.com and read my book, Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, rate it, review it, and binge on all our episodes on grief and happiness. I can't wait to welcome you back to another episode.